He woke up before the sun. The alarm clock buzzed faintly in the corner, but he had been awake for a few minutes already, thinking about the day ahead. The little apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. He could hear the faint breathing of his child from the other room. He paused for a moment, listening, a small smile touching his face. Life had been hard, but moments like this made it all feel worthwhile. He got up, stretched his stiff muscles, and went to the kitchen. Coffee first. Always coffee. He measured the grounds, poured the water, and waited for it to drip, the smell slowly filling the tiny space. The warmth of the cup in his hands was a small comfort, a brief moment of peace before the day began in full. His child would wake up soon, and the morning routine would start. Breakfast, dressing, school prep. It was a lot, but he had gotten used to it. He looked around the apartment. It wasn't much. The paint was faded, a small leak had recently appeared near the window, and the old couch had a tear on one arm. But it was theirs. It was safe. He had worked hard to make sure they had a roof over their heads and food on the table, and even if it wasn't fancy, it was home. His child's laughter in the evenings made it feel like the richest place in the world. The morning flew by in a blur of small tasks. Making pancakes while answering a dozen questions, tying shoelaces, finding misplaced homework. He moved like a well-oiled machine, every step practiced, every action automatic. His child was bouncing around, excited about something at school, talking a mile a minute. He laughed more than he had in weeks, enjoying the innocence and energy that children naturally bring. After sending the child off to school, he finally had a moment to himself. He sank into the couch with a deep sigh. The quiet was almost eerie after the chaos of the morning. Bills lay scattered on the table. Rent, electricity, groceries, a small credit card balance. He stared at the numbers, knowing he had to make them work somehow. Money had always been tight, but he had learned to manage it carefully, stretch every dollar, and find small ways to save. Work was next. He worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 if there was a chance to pick up extra hours. He cleaned offices at night and drove a delivery route in the mornings. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was honest work. He didn't have much time for himself, and he didn't see his friends often, but he had a sense of pride. He was providing for his child, and that was enough to keep him going. The streets were just waking up as he drove to the first job. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. He loved moments like these, when the world seemed calm and possibilities felt endless. Sometimes he imagined a life different from this one, filled with more comfort, more freedom. But those thoughts were fleeting. The reality of responsibility was heavy, and he carried it without complaint. At work, he moved with practiced precision. He knew every corner, every desk, every trash can that needed attention. The offices smelled of coffee and paper, a familiar scent that had become part of his daily life. He smiled at the few regular employees he saw, exchanging nods or small talk. They didn't know much about him, just that he worked hard and quietly. That was enough. By midday, he had finished the morning route. He grabbed a sandwich from the small corner store, eating quickly before heading to the next job. Life was a constant balancing act, moving from task to task, job to job, but he had mastered it over the years. He never complained, even when exhaustion crept in or when it felt like the world was too heavy to bear. He had learned to keep moving, one step at a time. In the afternoons, he sometimes went to the park to wait for his child to finish school. Watching the other kids play, laughing, chasing, and shouting, he felt a pang of longing for his own childhood. He hadn't had it easy either, and he had vowed to make sure his child experienced as much joy as possible. He joined in sometimes, pushing the swing or tossing a ball, feeling a moment of pure happiness that made all the struggles seem worth it. Evenings were the hardest. He cooked dinner, helped with homework, and listened to stories about the day. His child's eyes sparkled with excitement as they shared tales from school, the small victories, the playground adventures. He offered encouragement, praised effort, and sometimes offered gentle advice. These moments were precious. They were a reminder of why he worked so hard, why he pushed through exhaustion and stress. After bedtime, he often sat alone, reflecting. The apartment was quiet again, and he allowed himself to think about dreams he rarely spoke of. Maybe one day, he could afford a bigger place, a safer neighborhood, perhaps even a vacation somewhere sunny. But for now, the focus was survival and giving his child the best possible life within his means. He checked the bills once more, making calculations in his head. Every dollar mattered. He planned the week carefully, noting which errands needed to be done, which jobs had extra hours available. Life had taught him discipline, the kind that only comes from necessity. There was no room for waste, no room for error. And yet, despite the pressure, he carried himself with a quiet dignity, never letting despair take hold. Before he went to bed, he peeked into his child's room, smiling at the peaceful sleeping face. He felt a surge of love and responsibility, a reminder that all the effort, all the sacrifice, was for this one small human who depended on him. He whispered a promise to keep going, to never give up, to always put his child first. As he finally lay down, exhaustion pulled at him, but sleep was a welcome visitor. He thought of the day ahead, knowing it would be long and tiring, yet necessary. Every day was a challenge, every day a test, but he faced it with courage and determination. He was a single dad, yes, but more than that, he was a provider, a protector, and a hero in the quiet, everyday sense. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new struggles, new moments of joy and frustration. And he would meet them all, as he had every day, with unwavering commitment. Life wasn't easy, but it was theirs, and that made every small victory, every shared laugh, every peaceful night, a treasure beyond measure. He closed his eyes, finally surrendering to sleep, ready to do it all over again, knowing that his love and effort were shaping a future full of hope for the little one who depended on him. The next day started like any other. The single dad was busy with morning routines, making breakfast, helping with homework, and seeing his child off to school. He barely had a moment to sit down with a cup of coffee before leaving for work. The day seemed ordinary, but life had a surprise waiting for him, one he never could have imagined. He was finishing the first part of his morning route when a sleek, black car pulled up next to him. The window rolled down, and a man in an expensive suit leaned out, his watch glinting in the sunlight. There was something about the man that immediately suggested wealth and power. His presence felt commanding, almost unreal in the middle of the ordinary street. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice calm but with an edge of authority. "Are you available for a private conversation?" The dad paused, a little surprised. He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded cautiously. "Sure. What is this about?" The man smiled faintly and gestured to the car. "It will be easier to talk inside." Something in his gut told him this was unusual. He had met all kinds of people during his life, but never someone who approached him like this. Still, curiosity and politeness made him follow the man. He opened the car door and sat down, feeling slightly out of place in the luxurious interior. The seats were leather, the dashboard filled with screens and buttons he had never seen before. The man looked at him directly. "I'll get straight to the point. I have a proposition for you, one that not many people would refuse. I am willing to give you $1 million for a single night. That's it. One night. Your choice." The dad blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. $1 million? His mind raced. That was more money than he had seen in his life. It could pay off every debt, buy a new house, cover tuition, and still leave plenty for the future. It was tempting beyond words. But alongside the temptation, a wave of disbelief and concern washed over him. Who was this man? Why would he offer such a thing to a stranger? And what exactly did he mean by one night? The questions were endless, each carrying weight, but he tried to stay calm. I don't understand," he said finally. "Why me? Why would you offer this?" The billionaire, he realized that was the only way to describe the man, smiled, a little amused. "You have qualities I admire. Integrity, resilience, responsibility. People like you are rare, and I want to see how far your principles go. You could take the money and live a life without worry. Or you could decline, proving that your values mean more than wealth. The choice is yours. The dad's mind was spinning. Every day, he struggled to make ends meet, and suddenly, he was faced with a decision that could change everything overnight. He thought of his child, the small face that looked to him for guidance and protection. Could he explain taking this offer? Could he live with the consequences? The moral weight was heavy. The man leaned back, observing him closely. I understand this is a lot to consider. Take your time, think it over. But know this, opportunities like this rarely come twice. With that, he handed him a card and left, the car gliding away smoothly, leaving a faint scent of expensive cologne behind. The dad stood on the sidewalk, staring at the card. His hand trembled slightly as he read the details. One night, $1 million, the conditions explained clearly but leaving the personal choice in his hands. He slipped the card into his pocket and walked slowly to the next part of his route, his mind racing. All day, he replayed the moment over and over. At the cleaning job, he found himself distracted. He wiped a counter twice, checked a corner 3 times, but the thoughts wouldn't leave. He imagined the bills paid, the apartment upgraded, a safe future for his child. The freedom, the security, it was overwhelming. But so was the moral conflict. During his delivery route, he considered what friends and family might say. Some would say take the money. Who wouldn't? It was a life-changing sum. But others might question his character. Could he justify it to himself? Could he live with the choice if it went against his principles? He stopped at a small park during a break and sat on a bench. The world around him felt distant, almost surreal. He looked at the children playing, laughing freely, unaware of the heavy choices adults must make. He thought about his child, about the values he wanted to pass on. Integrity, honesty, self-respect. Could those values be bought or compromised for money? The answer seemed clear, but the temptation lingered. Later that evening, he discussed it with no one, keeping the thoughts private. He paced in the kitchen, ran his hands through his hair, and finally sat down at the table. The card was still there, staring at him like a silent judge. He could almost hear the billionaire's words echoing in his mind. People like you are rare. Prove your principles. He remembered the small victories of his life, the late nights working extra shifts, the times he went without so his child could have something, the sacrifices no one ever saw. They were all for the future, for love, for family. Could he risk compromising that for money? The answer came slowly, as a quiet certainty. He thought about the lessons he wanted to teach his child. That life is not just about money, that choices define character, that love and responsibility matter more than wealth. He imagined his child looking up to him, trusting him to always do the right thing. The thought filled him with resolve. Yet, he did not dismiss the offer lightly. He considered the impact of taking it. It would solve immediate problems. Yes. But at what cost? The worry, the guilt, the self-doubt. Could he live with a choice that might make him feel compromised? The fear of losing self-respect outweighed the lure of the money. The night grew darker, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the heater. He sat alone, thinking, reflecting, and finally reaching a place of clarity. He did not need to act immediately, but he knew in his heart what the decision should be. The billionaire's offer was tempting, yes, but it could not outweigh the values he held dear, the life he wanted to teach his child. The next morning, he woke with a sense of calm. The offer was still in his mind, but the clarity of purpose replaced the confusion and temptation. He would not compromise himself. He would not sacrifice his principles for wealth. The thought brought a quiet smile. It was a relief, a deep, grounding certainty that no amount of money could replace. He prepared breakfast, helped with schoolwork, and sent his child off with a hug and a kiss. The world outside continued as usual, unaware of the choice looming in the life of one ordinary man. Yet, in that small apartment, the decision had already been made in the quiet of the night, in the reflection of a man who knew what truly mattered. Work was still demanding, the streets were busy, and life continued with all its challenges. But there was a newfound confidence in him, a quiet strength. He had faced a test, one that would have tempted almost anyone, and he had made his choice. It was not about money, it was not about power, it was about who he was, and who he wanted to be for his child. As he finished his evening tasks, he looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, the billionaire might be waiting for an answer, expecting perhaps a different response. But he was at peace. The moral weight had been considered, the temptation acknowledged, and the right path chosen. It was not easy, and it never would be, but it was honest. And in that honesty, he found strength, pride, and the quiet assurance that he had done the right thing. The morning light came slowly through the blinds, casting soft stripes across the floor of the small apartment. The single dad sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring into the dark liquid as if it could offer answers. The card from the billionaire lay beside him, a silent reminder of the decision he now had to make. It had been on his mind constantly, replaying in his thoughts like a song he could not turn off. Every choice he made in the coming hours felt impossibly important. He thought about his child first. The small face, bright with curiosity and innocence, seemed to look up at him even when the room was empty. He imagined explaining the offer and the decision he might make. Could he look into those trusting eyes and tell a lie, or risk making a choice that might compromise his values? The thought tightened something deep in his chest. He knew that whatever he chose, it had to be something he could live with, and something that would not undermine the example he wanted to set. The dollar signs were hard to ignore. $1 million could erase every worry he had ever carried. The rent, overdue bills, groceries for months, school fees, the broken washing machine, the small medical expenses that never seemed to end. It could all be solved in one night. For a man who had been scraping by for years, who had often gone to bed wondering if the next paycheck would be enough, the temptation was enormous. He allowed himself a moment to imagine what life could be like. A bigger apartment, better food, more opportunities, and even some comfort for himself. It felt almost unreal, like a dream he had no right to entertain. But along with the dreams, there was a shadow of fear. He knew deep down that this offer came with consequences. Accepting might change him in ways he could not foresee. Even if it seemed harmless on the surface, the feeling of compromising his principles might haunt him forever. The thought of betraying his own moral compass, even silently, made him shiver. Could a night, one night, truly be worth so much money if it meant betraying the very essence of who he was? He remembered his life before his child, the struggles he had faced as a younger man. He had learned early that life demanded sacrifices, that shortcuts often led to regret. Each lesson had shaped him, teaching him that integrity and hard work mattered more than instant gain. These were not abstract ideas. They were lived experiences, carved into him through years of effort and persistence. And now, the billionaire's offer tested everything he believed in. As he walked through the apartment to get some fresh air, he thought about the future. He thought about the plans he had, small though they might be. A steady life, a safe environment for his child, a chance to save a little for the future. He imagined moments that could be spent laughing, reading together, watching sunsets, and sharing stories. These moments were priceless to him, and he worried that money, no matter how large, could never buy the same feeling of fulfillment. The streets outside were beginning to fill with morning traffic. People rushed past him, lost in their own lives, unaware of the inner storm he was facing. He felt a sense of isolation, as if he alone had been chosen for a test no one else could understand. He watched a young mother cross the street, her child holding her hand tightly. He saw their smiles, the simple joy, and felt a pang of longing for a life that could be simple and free of moral dilemmas. Yet, the reality of his choice remained unavoidable. He returned to the apartment, pacing, trying to sort out the swirling thoughts in his mind. He considered seeking advice from friends, but the offer was too personal, too sensitive. There was no one he could trust to fully understand the gravity of the decision. It had to be his alone, and that made it heavier. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, trying to find a center, a place of clarity amid the chaos. Memories of his child's milestones came unbidden. The first steps, the first words, the quiet nights when a small hand would slip into his. He thought of the promises he had made silently, to always protect, always guide, always lead by example. The idea of breaking those promises for money felt wrong in a way that made his stomach churn. He knew that a night, one single night, could never repay the lifetime of love and trust he had built with his child. Hours passed. He moved mechanically, making breakfast, checking messages, doing small chores, but his mind was elsewhere. Every sound, every movement reminded him of the offer. He imagined scenarios, what it would feel like to take the money, what the billionaire might expect, how it would feel to lie to himself and possibly to his child. Each scenario brought a mix of fear and temptation, a battle he could not escape. He decided to write down his thoughts, to make sense of the turmoil. On a piece of scrap paper, he listed the benefits: security, comfort, freedom from financial stress. Then he listed the costs: loss of self-respect, moral compromise, potential regret, the burden of secrecy. The list was stark, and as he looked at it, he realized the scales were tipping. The costs, the intangible consequences, far outweighed the immediate benefits. Money could solve problems, yes, but it could never replace character or peace of mind. By late afternoon, he felt exhausted. The mental weight was heavier than any physical labor he had endured. He needed clarity. He sat by the window, watching the sun dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beauty of the evening reminded him of the simple joys in life that money could not buy. A quiet laugh, a shared meal, a bedtime story, a small hand held in his. It was these things that defined happiness, not wealth alone. He reflected on the billionaire who had approached him. Powerful, wealthy, accustomed to getting anything he desired. Yet, here was a man who thought he could challenge someone else's values with money. The single dad felt a quiet strength rising within him. He understood that this was more than just an offer. It was a test of character. And he had always believed that integrity was non-negotiable, no matter the temptation. The evening grew darker. He made dinner, helped with homework, and listened to stories from his child. The laughter, the excitement, the innocent joy, it grounded him, reminding him of why he could not compromise. Every smile, every question, every hug was a reminder that his life was not just his own. The responsibility was real, profound, and unyielding. After his child went to bed, he sat alone at the table, looking at the card once more. The temptation still lingered, as strong as ever, but the clarity of his principles now outweighed it. He thought of every hard night, every sacrifice, every moment he had chosen right over. Easy, honesty over deceit. He understood that this moment, too, was part of the life he had built, a life of choices that mattered. He knew he had to face the billionaire, to make a decision that would define the rest of the story. But for now, he allowed himself a quiet moment of relief. He had wrestled with the temptation, weighed every consequence, and found the answer within himself. It was not easy, and it had taken hours of reflection, but he felt a sense of quiet pride. He had chosen his values over money, love over temptation, integrity over comfort. As he finally lay down for the night, the apartment silent and peaceful, he felt a deep sense of calm. He had faced the inner storm and emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring the moment of truth, the conversation that would test him in a new way. But he was ready. Ready not because he had nothing to lose, but because he knew exactly what he could not compromise. His principles, his love for his child, his integrity, they were unshakable. And that, he realized, was worth more than any sum of money the world could offer. The next morning, he felt a quiet determination. The decision had been made in his mind, but now came the moment of facing the billionaire. He had spent hours thinking, pacing, reflecting, imagining every possible outcome. Every scenario had been considered, every temptation weighed, every moral question answered. Now it was time to act. He met the sleek black car at the same place as before. The billionaire stepped out, smiling, as if he knew the answer already. The man's presence was imposing, yet the single dad stood tall, taking a deep breath before stepping forward. "I've thought a lot about your offer," he said, his voice steady, calm, but filled with a quiet strength. "I know the money could change my life, solve my problems, and give me freedom. But I cannot accept it. One night for $1 million is not worth compromising who I am, or the example I want to set for my child. The billionaire's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He had expected hesitation, perhaps a long struggle, but not this firm and immediate conviction. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but there was also a sense of challenge in his eyes. "Are you certain?" he asked. "This is not just a small offer. One night, and your life would be completely different. You could have anything you want." The dad nodded. "I am certain. I have worked hard to live an honest life, and I want my child to grow up knowing the value of integrity. Money is important, yes, but not more important than character, love, and responsibility. One night cannot buy the peace of mind I need, nor the respect I want to teach my child." The billionaire leaned back, studying him, weighing the words. There was a long silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. The dad stood firm, unwavering, feeling a quiet pride swelling within him. He realized that the act of saying no, of holding on to his values, was a victory in itself. Most people would say yes without hesitation. The billionaire finally said, his voice softer, tinged with respect. "You are different. I have to admit, I did not expect this response. I wanted to see if your principles were as strong as they appeared." The dad nodded again. "They are. I cannot compromise them, no matter the temptation. I am a father first, a man of my word, and I must live in a way that reflects the lessons I want my child to learn." The billionaire smiled faintly, a mix of admiration and surprise. "You've proven something rare today. It is not often that I meet someone who values integrity over money. You could have had everything, yet you chose principles over wealth. That is commendable." For a moment, the single dad felt an unexpected warmth. Respect from someone so powerful, someone accustomed to getting what he wanted, was a small victory in itself. It reinforced the sense of purpose that had guided him through sleepless nights, hard work, and endless struggles. He had done the right thing. The conversation ended with a handshake. The billionaire gave a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the choice made. There was no lingering tension, no anger, only a recognition of human strength and character. The single dad walked away, a sense of relief and quiet pride following him. He had faced the ultimate test and had emerged with his integrity intact. On the way home, he thought about the lessons learned. Life was full of challenges, some expected, some shocking and sudden. How one responded to these moments defined character more than any material possession could. He realized that wealth could never replace respect, love, or the trust of someone who depended on you. His child, waiting at home, represented all the reasons he had chosen wisely. Every smile, every laugh, every shared moment was more valuable than any sum of money. Returning to the apartment, he was greeted with excitement and chatter. His child ran up to him, full of stories and questions about the day. He listened, laughed, and encouraged, feeling a deeper sense of connection than ever before. The mundane routines, the small victories, the shared meals, all of it felt more precious now, filled with a meaning that no amount of money could add. That night, he reflected on the encounter once more. The billionaire's offer, shocking as it was, had not shaken him in the end. It had tested him, yes, but it had also clarified what truly mattered. He understood that integrity and love were not just abstract ideals. They were the foundation of the life he was building for his child. Every decision, every sacrifice, every act of honesty contributed to that foundation. Sleep came easier than it had in weeks. The apartment was quiet, the air calm, and he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had faced temptation, confronted a test of character, and made a choice that aligned with his deepest values. The weight of moral conflict had lifted, leaving behind a quiet pride and assurance. In the days that followed, the story of the encounter remained a private triumph. Life returned to its routines, but there was a subtle shift within him. He walked taller, felt stronger, and carried a quiet confidence that no challenge could undermine. The knowledge that he had made the right choice, in the most extraordinary circumstances, fortified him against future struggles. He continued to work hard, to provide for his child, and to nurture the relationship that mattered more than anything else. Every smile, every hug, every shared moment reinforced the lesson he had demonstrated, not with words, but through action. Integrity, courage, and love were his true wealth, and he held them tightly, knowing that they would guide him through life's uncertainties. The billionaire, somewhere far away, might continue to wonder at the answer he received, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was the life being lived in that small apartment, the laughter echoing through its walls, and the quiet strength of a man who chose values over money. It was a choice that would ripple outward, shaping a future filled with trust, love, and unshakable character. He knew that life would continue to bring challenges, some expected, some unimaginable. But now he faced them with a renewed sense of purpose, grounded in the knowledge that he had stayed true to himself. The world might offer temptations, shortcuts, or easy solutions, but the path he had chosen was clear. Every decision would be guided by the principles he had reaffirmed, by the love he held for his child, and by the understanding that integrity was priceless. As the night settled, he looked at the sleeping face of his child and whispered a quiet promise to continue living in a way that honored their trust. He understood that every day was an opportunity to demonstrate values, to teach through example, and to live authentically. The billionaire's offer had been extraordinary, but it had also revealed a deeper truth. The measure of a person was not in the money they could earn, but in the principles they refused to compromise. With that thought, he finally allowed himself to rest fully, knowing that he had faced the ultimate challenge and had emerged not only unshaken but stronger. He had chosen love, integrity, and responsibility over wealth, and that choice would echo through his life, shaping the man he was and the father he would always strive to be. Days passed, and life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The encounter with the billionaire remained in the back of his mind, but it no longer weighed on him like a storm cloud. Instead, it had transformed into a quiet strength, a reminder of what he valued most. He continued his morning routines, helping his child get ready for school, preparing breakfast, and setting off to work. Yet there was a subtle difference in the way he moved through the day. Every step, every task, carried a sense of purpose, a quiet confidence born from the choice he had made. At work, he approached tasks with the same diligence as before, but now there was a deeper pride in his effort. Sweeping floors, cleaning offices, making deliveries, every action felt like a reinforcement of the life he was building. It was not wealth or luxury that made him proud, but the knowledge that he was living in alignment with his principles. He had faced temptation, considered the easy way out, and yet chosen to remain true to himself and his child. He noticed small changes around him, too. Colleagues who had barely noticed him before now seemed to treat him with a subtle respect. Perhaps it was not visible in words, but in the way they nodded, the slight pauses of acknowledgement. He didn't seek attention or praise, yet there was a quiet sense of recognition that came from living honorably. It reminded him that character often spoke louder than money or status. At home, evenings were still full of homework, dinner, and bedtime stories. The laughter of his child filled the apartment, more precious than any reward he could imagine. He made a point to savor each moment, to be fully present. Every question asked, every story told, every small smile was a treasure. He had learned that these moments, simple and fleeting, were the true wealth of life. The experience with the billionaire also became a story he reflected on silently. He thought about the man's words, the challenge, and the respect that had followed his refusal. It had been more than an offer of money. It had been a test of character, a mirror showing him the strength within himself. In facing that moment, he had discovered resilience he didn't know he possessed, a moral clarity that now guided every decision. He also realized that this encounter could serve as a lesson for his child. One day, when the child was older, he would share the story, not the details of the offer, but the principle behind it. He would teach that life would present choices, some tempting, some difficult, and that what mattered most was how one responded. That integrity, courage, and responsibility were values worth more than any amount of money. Financially, life remained a challenge, but he faced it with a renewed perspective. He continued to work multiple jobs, stretch each dollar, and plan carefully. Yet, the pressure felt lighter, not because the burden had lessened, but because he had reaffirmed the reason behind it. He was working not just to survive, but to live honorably, to teach his child the importance of doing what is right, even when no one is watching. Neighbors and friends sometimes asked him about his life, about the struggles and how he managed. He smiled and shared pieces of his journey, not as a boast, but as a reflection of human resilience. He wanted others to see that integrity and love were powerful forces, capable of guiding a person through even the most extraordinary circumstances. Life was not about shortcuts or easy solutions, but about staying true to one's values. In the small moments, he noticed growth in himself. He was more patient, more thoughtful, and more attentive. He had faced a profound test and had come through it with confidence and pride. That experience had strengthened his sense of self, allowing him to approach challenges with clarity and calm. Every difficulty that arose afterward seemed smaller in comparison, every obstacle a reminder that he had faced something far greater and remained steadfast. He began to dream again, but his dreams were grounded in reality and principle. He envisioned a stable home for his child, opportunities for education, a life of learning and joy. He imagined vacations not as indulgence, but as moments of shared experience and happiness. These dreams were achievable because they were rooted in careful planning, hard work, and moral certainty. He understood now that true success was measured not by wealth alone, but by the ability to live authentically and honorably. One evening, after putting his child to bed, he sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The world continued around him, full of possibilities, challenges, and temptations. Yet he felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced an extraordinary moment and had chosen the path that aligned with his values. That choice had strengthened him, shaped him, and set a foundation for the life he would continue to build. The billionaire's offer, once a source of intense temptation and inner conflict, now seemed almost distant, like a lesson etched into his memory. It had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately reaffirmed what mattered most: integrity, love, and responsibility. He understood that while money could provide comfort, it could never replace character or the quiet joys of family life. He continued to guide his child, teaching through example, showing that principles are more valuable than instant gain. Life was still a challenge, but each day felt manageable, each struggle meaningful, because it was faced with honesty and care. He found joy in small victories, satisfaction in effort well done, and pride in the life he was creating. Neighbors, colleagues, and even strangers noticed the calm strength in him, though they might not have known the reason. It was a quiet radiance, the kind that comes from living authentically, from making choices that reflect one's deepest values. He carried that strength into every interaction, every decision, every day. As weeks turned into months, he reflected occasionally on the billionaire, imagining what the man might think about the decision he had made. Perhaps he would be surprised, perhaps he would respect it. But it no longer mattered. What mattered was the life he was living, the example he was setting, and the lessons he was imparting to his child. Those were the true legacies, the lasting rewards of a life lived with integrity. He knew that more challenges would come, that life would continue to test him in unexpected ways. But he also knew that he had proven to himself that he could face temptation, struggle with difficult choices, and emerge stronger and wiser. That knowledge became a part of him, a guiding principle that would shape every decision he made in the future. In quiet moments, he would sometimes smile at the memory of the encounter, not with regret or longing, but with appreciation. It had been a rare and profound moment, one that had revealed the depth of his own character. It had reminded him of the importance of values, the strength of love, and the power of integrity. And in those reflections, he found a sense of fulfillment and peace that money could never buy. Life continued in its ordinary rhythm, but the single dad now moved through it with a quiet assurance. He faced work, bills, responsibilities, and challenges with strength and clarity. He cherished the laughter of his child, the warmth of shared moments, and the satisfaction of living a life true to his principles. Every day was a testament to his resilience, a confirmation that the choices he made mattered deeply. And as he drifted to sleep each night, he did so with a heart unburdened by regret, filled instead with pride and love. He had faced a test unlike any other, one that could have changed his life in unimaginable ways. Yet he had chosen wisely, chosen love over money, principles over temptation, and in doing so, he had secured a legacy far richer than any fortune could offer. His life, his values, and the bond with his child had become the truest measure of wealth, the kind that would endure far beyond any fleeting offer or momentary temptation.